Dirty Birds, what's up? And welcome to another edition of Falcons Final Whistle presented by Zaxby's. I'm your host, Will McFadden, joined as always by Tori, McElhaney, and Terrin, Waack. And we are here to unfortunately break down an 18-10 loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers in the Falcons season opener here at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Really quickly, Tori, can you summarize your thoughts of today's game in 10 words or less?
As I wrote post-game, the honeymoon is officially over.
That was close.
As I wrote post-game, the honeymoon is officially over. Got there in 9.
Ooh, even if you counted post-game as 2, it would have been 10 on the dot.
10. I was going to say, but we know post-game is one word.
Exactly.
Thanks to the style guide I put together. Terrin, 10 words or less. What you got?
The rose-colored glasses have come off.
Love it. That was short and sweet. Mine would be Grady Jarrett is good. TJ Watt is better.
Ooh.
That's tough.
It is tough, but honestly, there was a lot of tough in today's game. And I think we can probably start with the toughest, which was Atlanta's offense.
Were they tough? Were they tough performance?
It was a little tough to watch at times. You know, it was 226 yards total, 137 yards passing, 89 yards rushing. They were 2 of 9 on third down. But what was really interesting is that, 4.5 yards per play, they were kind of moving the ball in fits and starts. They just could never really string a drive together, Tori.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And that's something that as you're watching the game, especially in that second half where they were moving the ball, like what you're talking about. Bijan Robinson was getting 6 yards a pop, 4 yards a pop there for a little bit. But the problem was these turnovers. Kirk Cousins throws. Sorry, that was
these turnovers.
But like Kirk Cousins throws 2 interceptions. Almost was a third at one point. The guy just couldn't hold on to the ball. And then there's this fumbled snap that the timing was off. It hits Ross Dwelley in the legs while he's in motion. There are these, especially in the second half, there are these penalties that just completely get the offense off track. Kind of throwaway 17-yard pickup by Kyle Pitts, and it puts Atlanta back on the 5-yard line in another instance. Like there were so many instances where the Falcons' issues were very self-inflicted in that Kirk Cousins said, those turnovers, he took responsibility for them, as I think he should. The self-inflicted wounds of these penalties, like those are some things that you just can't do in those scenarios where you're moving the ball okay, and especially knowing this Steelers defensive line and how good it is and how sharp it was playing and kind of how they were just playing with their ears pinned back, and there wasn't really anything this offensive line could do to stop TJ Watt. And
he's good.
He's exactly what you said at the top, and he's really, really good, and he's a game disruptor and he's a game wrecker, as Raheem Morris said in the middle of the week. And he did exactly that against the Falcons today. It was a tough offensive sledding there in the second half where they only had 51 total yards. Did not even get into the position to be able to put points on the board. When you lose 18-10, that is when you have the expectations and the perception of what this offense should be.
Yeah.
If you've been listening to this podcast, we had people coming in that are national folks being like, hey, Adams being like, this should be a top 10 offense. That what we saw today wasn't a top 10 offense. And they have to rectify that very, very quickly. They do not have time to kind of sit in these mistakes. They have to be fixed.
What stuck out to me most is we talk about it being a tough thing to watch. Well, it could have been tougher. Because you mentioned Dante Jackson almost had an interception when it was intended for Darnell Mooney. Dante Jackson then had another one later. So it's like he made up for his own error. But then you had the sacks that were negated because of Pittsburgh penalties. There were supposed to be 2 more sacks. There were only 2 on the record book, but there were another 2 that got completely washed because of Pittsburgh's own penalties. So it's just like, ooh, it was tough. Ooh, it could have been tougher.
And it was 2 strip sacks by TJ Watt.
Yep.
Fumbles.
Massive plays. And if you want to count, I know this was for Pittsburgh's offense, but George Pickens' big catch that was then negated because of pass interference on his part. The Steelers had a few plays in this game that were big, momentous plays that were wiped off. And that's where it felt like, okay, Atlanta is hanging around here. And usually when you're the team that is not capitalizing on some of those big moments and you're letting the other team hang around, it comes back to bite you in the butt. And
it didn't.
This game, it did not. But Terrin, I'm curious, because we talk about the expectations for this offense. And on the opening drive, that looked exactly like the offense I expected to see. Yet they looked sharp moving the ball down the field. Where do you think the wheels kind of fell off after that?
Oof.
Was it the offensive line really, or Kirk, or all of it?
I don't know. I mean, it's just, whether it was communication or not being in sync, it's just like it was discombobulated. It wasn't flowing. Like, it was very staccato rather than rhythmic. I think I'm using those terms correctly when it comes to music. But it just, that first drive, you're like, okay. And maybe it's because it didn't finish in the end zone. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I was saying, go for it. Go for it on fourth. But no, they weren't going to do that. And so it's just, you had the potential and it didn't turn into reality even in that first drive. And I feel like that was the theme overall with this offense, because as Tori was saying, so much hype surrounding it. And then it fell flat, like almost overhyped, underdelivered.
Yeah, I'm a very big proponent of, kind of what the Falcons did in the preseason, what a lot of teams are doing. Rest your guys, get them healthy. That's ultimately what matters. But Tori, after seeing kind of the start that the team had, I do think it's now fair to wonder if some of these, at least like miscues with the operation, you see Kirk kind of like having to grab a guy and pull him over and take him to the other side of the formation. Maybe those get cleared up a little bit.
Maybe. And I think at the end of the day, I'll say this, like, I don't make the decisions about who plays in the preseason. Yes. Shocking, I know. From my Twitter right now, you would think I do, but I do not. So I preface that by saying, I don't know if a series in the preseason changes at all what we saw this offense do today. You can go back and forth on that all day long. The reality is that the Falcons didn't play their starters in the preseason. They come out and they don't look whole offensively in this first week 1 game. Is there a correlation to that? There is a loud section of the fan base and also of the league at large that says yes. Mm-hmm. And they have a reason to feel that way. The Falcons didn't give them a reason today to not feel that way. Yeah. And I think that's the crux of it. I, again, don't know. We won't know, because Raheem Morris has said, I'm not going to operate in this way. As long as I'm the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, this is what we're doing in the preseason. He's made that abundantly clear. It's
not going to change, and you can find results all around the league in week 1 that support an argument.
Right.
Well, and at the same time, of course, this is me saying it, who wanted them to play in the preseason. It fell apart more so in the second half. Mm-hmm. That it's like, maybe it would be a stronger argument had they come out here and been a mess from the beginning. But that first drive showed potential. Mm-hmm. And then it's kind of like the wheels started wobbling and then fell off. Whereas I think that's where the argument of, if they played in the preseason, you wouldn't have had that like catch-up period. But they didn't have that catch-up period. It was like kind of a different beast all on its own.
It's like, I understand the argument. And we even went back and forth in the preseason about it, like the three of us. And it's like, you can go back and forth all day long about it. I don't know. There's not a right or wrong answer. Yeah. But the people who feel a certain way either way are kind of like, I'm right, and I know I'm right because of this. And again, I say it, the Falcons didn't do anything to make the argument against it.
Yeah, they didn't make their own argument today. Yeah. And that's where it is so weird, because it is such a binary. It's like either they are out there or they're not. Mm-hmm. And so there is no gray area where people can meet in the middle. It's either like, no, I'm right and they should be out there and this is why, or like, no, they shouldn't be out there and this is why. But there is no common ground for anybody to find. And
preseason's over. Oh, well, it's done.
Yeah. Thank God. There are a few people, though, that, and in kind of looking at the next gen stats, Kirk, at least when the 1:00 games had wrapped up, and of course Thursday and Friday's games as well, he had the 3rd fastest time to throw. I guess the shortest time to throw, 2.55 seconds. Which, when you look at the other guys on that list, Joe Burrow was right in front of him, and Tua historically gets the ball out very quickly. Joe Burrow usually doesn't, but I do think that coming off of an injury, Kirk coming off of an injury, you see offenses that want to get the ball out in rhythm on time. And yet, when you look at some of the guys who weren't involved, Drake London, Darnell Mooney, some of these kind of more explosive players in the passing game, that's where I think either Pittsburgh took them away and did a good job. And I'll need to kind of like look at this game again to really get a feel for that. But it just felt like a quick passing game. Ray McLeod, Bijan Robinson, and they never really tested the Steelers down the field, did they, Terrin?
No, I mean, the furthest down the field that they went was probably Kyle Pitts in the end zone, and he was wide open. So that must have been like a fluke thing. Give credit where credit is due. Like Kyle got where he was supposed to be, kind of thing.
Kirk scrambled and extended the play. Looked really good.
So that was a good one.
The only one that was longer was the 15-yarder to Ray McLeod that got tipped at the line of scrimmage. Which could have been a turnover had Ray not.
Yeah. Oh, that was a mad jump he had to do to get it too.
Yeah, like that was the longest, I think, play from scrimmage in terms of Kirk Cousins in the pocket.
Yeah, his longest air yard completion, again, according to like Next Gen Stats, was like 30.7 yards. And that's not a 30-yard gain. That's just how far the ball traveled. And I want to say his longest official pass was 20 yards.
To Ray.
Yes. So again, like it's not a dink and dunk offense, but like it was pretty low in terms of the yards attempted.
Which is very different than I think what we expected from this offense.
Yeah, and what we saw in camp.
Right. Like that was something that we praised for a lot of camp, that this was going to be a team that was going to challenge you vertically. And that's another reason why I was so disappointed in what I saw from the pass game. And, maybe things would have looked differently if pass protection was a little bit better. If you don't have TJ Watt out there and Kirk Cousins maybe has a little bit more time for the route trees to progress and he can hit guys on the run down the field a little bit more. But this looks very reminiscent of, I feel like I'm having the same conversation that I've had the last 2 years, where it's like the defense did enough to hold up their end of the bargain and the offense wasn't scoring.
For sure.
And I feel like I'm just kind of a broken record at this point. And I thought that this was going to be a different day. I thought this offense was going to be different than it ended up being.
Well, here are some of the differences. Is, for starters, this is the very first game of a new regime. And so for it to look like it has the last couple of years on day one, I don't think is as big of an indictment as it looking the way it did at the tail end of a 3-year kind of stretch. So the hope is that this is the ground floor and that you continue to build from here.
And I also think that, to that point, at the end of the day, and this is not to make an excuse or anything like that, but the wounds that the Falcons had were those self-inflicted wounds. If you don't have those turnovers, if Kirk Cousins doesn't make those mistakes in those moments, if there aren't those penalties.
Yep. 2 of 9 on third down.
Yeah,
if you're better.
There are certain aspects of what we saw. There were still moments of the way they used Bijan Robinson where it looked like how you should use Bijan Robinson. There are these moments. There are these wrinkles in the offense. It's just, okay, let's see more of that and less of what we saw in the second half.
And Bijan finished this game with 111 yards total. So, I mean, again, he was a bright spot for sure. He didn't really break off that crazy run. I think he had a 13-yard gain was his longest, but it was on a play-by-play basis. Like, you can move the ball with Bijan, handing it off to him and kind of matriculate your way down the field. So I totally agree. But I like, from an offense perspective, -3 in the turnover margin, that has a huge impact, especially when it is a one-possession game ultimately at the end, even though that's 8 points. Let's quickly switch over to the defense. This was, we mentioned Bijan as a bright spot. The defense was probably the most real bright spot, I think. And it felt like they picked up where they left off last season, even though they've got 2 new additions, Matt Judon, Justin Simmons. I think you felt Judon's presence today a little bit more than Justin Simmons, which isn't surprising given, I think, how, a little quicker Matt Judon got acclimated into this team.
And I also think, considering that it's Justin Fields in the pocket and what he was being asked to do and how much they were relying on that run game in the second half.
But also credit, if I want to give Justin Simmons credit, they didn't take many deep shots down the field either. And you could feel that Justin Fields was looking for those deep shots. He was kind of sitting in the pocket looking deep, and I think the Falcons took that all away and really made him dump the ball down. And they did a great job rallying to make the tackles. I thought their third down defense was pretty strong today. That had a big 4th down stop that Nate Landman lost his mind about.
Yeah.
So, Terrin, what was your impression of the defense?
I think the defense is the winner of the Falcons for the day. I mean, that one is a given in the sense that they were consistent throughout the game in showing up. The fact that the Steelers never crossed into the end zone means the defense is doing their job.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, they did ultimately win the game, but that was all off of field goals. That's not necessarily defense's fault. They could have done better in keeping them away from that distance. But at the same time, Chris Boswell
was making a 57-yard field goal.
I was getting there. I was about to say at the same time, Chris Boswell was over here kicking from 57,
We're all just
54,
blowing out the listeners'
51.
eardrums.
Like, the ball was way away.
Here's the thing about this defense.
Gosh.
I do think that
Jump on me.
there were moments that this defense would want back. There were one too many explosive plays from George Pickens.
Yes.
There were one too many runs that I felt like should have been maybe 1 or 2 yard gains, and they turned into 5 or 6 yard gains. And I think just from talking to different guys in the locker room, hearing from different guys, it was very much there were, and Raheem Morris too, there were plays that this defense wanted back. But when push came to shove, and at the end of the day, they did what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
I'm okay if you bend, don't break, and you don't allow somebody in the end zone. I'm cool with that. If you can, I've always kind of subscribed to this. If you as a defense can keep an offense from scoring less than 20 points a game, you are giving your offense in this league and the professional ranks, you are giving them the best opportunity to go and win the game.
That's so crazy. That was my high school yearbook quote.
Was it really?
Yeah, that entire phrase.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe you.
But I say all that to say that if you're this defense, I feel like there's probably a level of like, we did our job and we can kind of stand on that.
Yep.
And something that you kind of have to look back on when you are kind of trying to take positives away from this game is that this defense showed up, played well, kept a team out of the end zone, and gave their offense chance after chance after chance to go and win the game.
This feels like another theme from last year that we talked about.
Yeah.
I'm having like flashbacks sitting in these same chairs being like, defense did its job. Mm-hmm. Offense did not.
It's a great point because, after going through this last year, right, and you see week 1, week 2, like the offense is kind of performing better, but then as the season wears along and you start getting into week 12, 13, 14, and you're theoretically still alive. And but when one side of the ball is consistently kind of doing their part, and I give a lot of credit to last year's team. I never really felt this, at least in the post-game locker room. I wasn't around practice like you guys were, so maybe it was there. But you do start to wonder if you start looking askew at anybody else because it's a team sport, right? And it takes all 3 phases of the game. But obviously that is putting the cart way before the horse because this is a new team, this is a new year, new staff, everything. And it's just week 1. So we don't want to overreact. But one thing we probably can overreact to was Grady Jarrett's debut or return. Like he played so well. We saw moments in the scrimmage that the team had during training camp where it was like vintage Grady Jarrett, fast, quick. He looked like that out there today. He had a sack and a half. He set the all-time franchise record for quarterback hits with 117. Terrin, what'd you see from Grady?
I talked to him in the locker room afterward, and you could just tell he was so happy. But what was really funny is, like, when did you know you were back? He's like, I woke up ready. I woke up, and I knew I was back. Like, he's like, I have worked so hard for this moment. There was no doubt in my mind I was going to be okay. And so with that, he kind of just, like, handled things business as usual. But what stood out to me most was really Raheem Morris's quote in the post-game press conference, because he said, probably some of the few times today you were able to show emotion when a guy like that, who's bigger than just the game of football for us and our community, makes a play coming off of the injury and the significance of his injury. Where it's just like, it was a tough game.
Yeah.
But you could smile when Grady Jarrett had his sack, when he assisted in a sack, when Grady Jarrett was back being Grady Jarrett. It was a highlight.
Today's episode of Falcons Final Whistle is brought to you by Zaxby's. And after a long game, when I'm tired and I need to refuel, I turn to Zaxby's. Their marinated, hand-breaded, fried to perfection chicken fingers, they hit the spot every time. Get yours with seasoned crinkle fries, a nice drink, and whichever of their 12 signature sauces you're feeling at the moment. But it always hits just right. So next time you need to refuel, go get yourself some Zaxby's.
What's frustrating in that, though, is that I don't know if people will remember that about this game. I don't know if people will know or even think twice that Grady Jarrett became the Falcons' all-time record holder in quarterback hits. He passed John Abraham with 117 quarterback hits.
Hey, now, there's a story on AtlantaFalcons.com coming.
Right, exactly. But also, when you think back to this week 1 game, I feel like the story isn't Grady Jarrett returning and playing the way that he did.
It's the offense.
It's the offense not performing. It's Arthur Smith and Justin Fields coming into Mercedes-Benz Stadium and beating the Falcons.
Yeah, it is.
That's the national story. And to kind of have Grady Jarrett accumulate everything and encompass what year 10 means to him, and he comes out and right off the bat he has a sack, and then he has this other big stop and he's making plays, and you can just see on the field the passion that he's playing with.
Grady got back.
Oh my gosh.
But how many people are going to remember that? And that's a part of Grady's career that I often wonder.
Yeah.
If I'm being completely honest.
No,
and
you're right.
Maybe people will kind of come at me for saying that, but it's something that I think about often. I guess maybe because of all the work that I've done with the Grady Jarrett story that we ran on AtlantaFalcons.com.
Go check it out.
Over the course of this last year, how embedded into Grady's story I've been. Like, I want people to remember this guy for what he's done. And I don't know if these offensive struggles and the fact that defense has kind of been a punching bag in his first years in the league, like, I don't know. I'm going on a soapbox and a tangent, but that I think about that. And in the context of this day and what it meant for him to get back, and that we have to talk so much about this offense. I mean, it just goes to show it's a team sport. It's not one person.
I think Grady will be remembered because of everything that he's done in the community as a leader in the locker room. And he's just a dang good football player. Mm-hmm. But
you wish it was more.
Yeah. And so Jonathan Babineau is probably a great comp, right? And Grady is a better version to me of Jonathan Babineau, and that's not a slight to Babs at all, but like, he was a part of that 2016 Super Bowl team, and nobody really recalls that. And he had a decade plus career here in Atlanta, was in a lot of ways kind of like original Grady, not to that level,
right?
But just a fan favorite who brought it and was a consistent presence every single week in the middle of that defensive line. And yeah, like, you don't hear Jonathan Babineau's name at all, really, by this fan base. I don't think that's going to be Grady, but your point is well taken, where as a defensive lineman, if you're not like an edge guy, if you're not TJ Watt or Myles Garrett or whatever, and Aaron Donald literally is maybe one of the greatest players in the history of this game, and like, that's the level it takes for people to care about kind of like that defensive tackle type of guy. So even on a day where he has 1.5 sacks, first game back, he's already got 1.5 sacks. That's awesome. We spent all offseason clamoring. Where's the pass rush coming from? It's coming from 97 out there on the field. He looks great. But yeah, we're all sitting here talking about the offense. That's what we're leading with. Terrin, anything else about this defense that you want to bring up?
No, not necessarily. Sorry.
I did think it was interesting, and this is something that we should monitor moving forward, is the fact that Mike Hughes got the start opposite AJ Terrell at corner.
Yeah.
And then for a few defensive series in the third quarter to start the second half, Clark Phillips got in there and got some reps, and then they went back to Mike Hughes in the fourth.
Yeah, that is interesting.
That's something I wonder if it's like...
Was Raheem asked about that at all?
No, he wasn't. Not post-game. I imagine we could ask him about it on Monday.
Yeah.
But that's just something that I'm going to keep an eye on, because that to me is a little bit like, okay, we
I don't think that position battle's over.
I told y'all.
It's fair.
I told y'all this thing is going to go all the way to week 7.
I just wonder, is it still a battle, or is it like Clark has carved out a role for himself, and how big is that? But I mean, to your point, like, yeah, corner is not a position where you have roles, really. You know, you got your nickels and then your outside guys, right? So yeah, maybe it is still going. I do think, last thing on the defense, though, the 17 third down attempts that Pittsburgh had is kind of indicative of what we're saying. Like, on the one hand, Atlanta's defense did a good job in forcing them into third downs a lot. I think they played pretty well on early downs. However, Pittsburgh was able to convert almost half of those. Yeah. And the fact that they had 17 third downs shows how often they had the football.
Yeah.
And when you have 3 turnovers and you're not converting your own third downs, yeah.
And I think, too, if I want this defense, if I'm just putting it out there, like an area that this defense could improve,
manifest it.
It still is sealing off the edge. I thought Justin Fields was able to leak out a little bit more. I thought Najee Harris was able to leak out a little bit more. Going back to what I said off the top about, there were 1 or 2 yard runs that turned into 4 or 5, 6 yard runs, and I think that's an area if you can kind of seal the edge a little bit and let your big guys work in the middle and make it that pocket a bit tougher to squeak out of, that would bode well for this defense.
So we're going to wrap it up with our game balls. So after each game, we will nominate one player we want to give a game ball to. Terrin, we'll start with you.
Well, if we're looking at both teams, I want to give it to Chris Boswell because the man was 6 of 6.
Your favorite colors are black and yellow. You want to give Chris Boswell the game ball.
And I love special teams.
We're going to trade you to Pittsburgh, I swear.
I've only been there once, so I don't know
what's good in
but no, seriously, I think I'm going to do Grady Jarrett because
shocker.
I know. Well, I did write about 600 words on him, but another point is he deserves it.
Yeah,
like
he does.
Erase the outcome of this game, and it's the Grady Jarrett game.
Yep.
I do hate that the outcome has completely overshadowed his comeback, but I think he took it in stride. He's like, I think the defense, he's like, I'm proud of how the defense performed, but there's still always room for improvement, and didn't blame anyone. That was a huge thing in the locker room. No one was blaming anyone.
Yeah, it's 1 of 17.
Yeah.
For me, obviously, you don't get a game ball if you don't win. But since we're giving out game balls for this segment,
it can be deflated. Give me a deflated game ball.
I would like to double down on Grady Jarrett getting the game ball for sure. I also would just like to say that I really liked what I saw from Nate Landman in the role that he was playing today. I think there were a few moments where you kind of did there were a few moments where you did miss Troy Anderson's speed, and you were trying to get more of that thumper mentality from Nate and Caden together instead of this Troy Anderson who can run sideline to sideline, bring guys down, and kind of going back to what I was talking about, help with the leaking of the pocket. But when Nate was in, I thought he did some good things, especially that we talked about it, that 4th down stop in the red zone to bring this offense back out at the specific time that they did, which was
there's 4 minutes left.
And it was their second to last drive, and it really felt like, okay, if they can go down and eat up all that clock,
15 to 10, score 17-15 win. Let's walk out of here.
That felt like a game-changing moment for this team, and I thought the fact that it was Nate Landman who has been working through the quad injury over the course of the last few weeks hasn't really been 110%. We've been talking about this whole idea of how the Falcons were going to deploy these 3 linebackers that can be your starting inside linebackers in Nate, Troy, and Caden. I liked the way that they used them. It's very obvious that it's okay, when they got their big guys in and they're wanting to stop the run, it's Nate. When they need some speed and they need to kind of maybe drop somebody into coverage or have some blitz packages, it's Troy. There wasn't a whole lot, maybe I'm wrong, I'll have to go back and look. I didn't think there was a whole lot of Caden with his hand in the dirt on the defensive line, which I think I want to see more of moving forward, because I think that's something he does really well, and I think that's actually what his roots are. And I think it provides a different layer and a different look, but maybe, again, something in the game plan didn't
I noticed it was a lot of this was a true 3-4 looking game. There were a lot of the tight fronts with your nose tackle and then your 5 techniques, and then you had your stand-up edge rushers out there. And so maybe when there's more of a 4-3 look, that's where you'll see Caden kind of mix in a little bit more. But that's a great pick. I will flip to the other side of the ball and name Bijan Robinson. The offense didn't have a great day, but I thought Bijan at least looked the part. Yeah. That's what I expected from Bijan. He's never really been that breakaway speedster. He's more of he's going to turn a 4-yard gain into an 8-yard gain.
Elusive,
with consistency. Yeah. And that's kind of where I thought he was, even though, again, it wasn't really a strong day for anybody on the offense, but he looked the part. Would love to see Tyler Algier get more than 3 carries next time. He averaged 7 yards a carry.
There was the play at the very, very beginning. It was one of the first couple of drives, and it was they put Bijan in motion, and then they handed it off to Tyler going the opposite way. I loved that play design.
Yeah.
And I feel like you can, and they did a few times, especially early. They had a couple of times where they had a 2-back set with Bijan and Tyler in. I think I want to see a little bit more of that. I liked what I saw when they had both of those guys in.
Well, rapid fire, 30 seconds or less. What did you think of Zach Robinson in his debut as Atlanta's play caller in an actual game setting?
I actually think it's really hard to tell at this point because of the fact that the mistakes that were made, I didn't think were scheme related.
Yeah,
I thought that it was a breakdown in
execution, in operation.
Right. Yeah. When you're talking about these buckets of problems and issues, it was turnovers and it was ill-timed penalties. I don't blame the play caller for that. He's up in the box. He can't tell Kirk. He's in his ear, but he can't tell Kirk, hey man, don't throw it to that guy.
Yeah.
So I'm
TBD.
I'm TBD on it. I think that we will know more when we are able to see these longer drives strung together, which I thought we were getting there in the first half. And the way that he is using Bijan Robinson, I think it's very obvious that there is an uptick in Bijan Robinson's usage.
Yeah.
How much more there needs to be balance with some of these other guys, I think we'll have to wait and see.
I was going to go off of the balance because I was looking at Bijan's record, and the most times he carried the ball last season was 22, then 19, then 18. So he's already up there when it comes to like carries in a game.
23 total touches today.
I'm just
50
looking at
total plays.
Yeah. Kirk threw the ball 26 times. So
Yeah.
Bijan touched the ball almost as many times as they let Kirk throw it.
Yeah, but I think you need to spread the love a bit more because, like we said, there was not much Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts. That I think finding a better balance is going to be the key.
Which you think about how, like, what was in, like, this is why I go back to kind of saying I don't really know how to evaluate Zach Robinson yet, is because it's like how many plays were drawn up that they couldn't get to.
Yes.
Because of pass protection issues, because of turnovers, because they're behind the sticks,
Yeah.
you know.
That's why that opening drive, if there is anything that anybody wants to go back to watch to maybe get a feel for this Falcons, like the first 15 plays, 10 plays, you'll script, right? And so the fact that the Falcons were able to string together a nice long opening possession, those are all plays that when Zach and Kirk and Raheem and everybody was sitting down for the game planning, they put those plays in there. They wanted to go to those plays. So that's probably indicative of what Atlanta would like its offense to look like when things are humming.
And in that drive, I'm looking at it, it's handoff to Bijan, Kirk to Darnell Mooney, Tyler Algier, 13-yard run, Bijan Robinson, Kirk to Drake, an incompletion, Kirk to Bijan.
Yep.
There was a level of, we're hitting different guys, we're doing different things. There was a
flow to it.
There was a flow to it.
Mm-hmm. And if Peyton Wilson, great rookie at an NC State Steelers linebacker, if he doesn't make a tackle on that screen pass down in the red zone to Bijan, I think Bijan scores on that opening drive. Mm-hmm. And who knows where we go from there. But where we're going to go from here is back home because we have put in a long day of work. So we're going to wrap it up after this 18-10 loss in week 1 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. What is next for Atlanta? They have a longer week ahead to prepare for a Monday night game on the road against the Philadelphia Eagles, who are fresh off their 34-29 win against the Green Bay Packers in Brazil. So Falcons got to turn right back around, get everything right, because they've got a pretty good team up ahead. So they've got a tough 3-game stretch. They're now entering game 2 of that, and it is going to be their first road game. So I hope they get the offense kind of worked out, the defense travels, and we will see where they go from here. But that will do it for us today. For Terrin Waack and Tori McElhaney, I'm Will McFadden. Thank you guys so much for listening to Falcons Final Whistle, presented by Zaxby's. We will see you all again soon.